Hi everyone, and welcome to the session, Make Your Team's Meeting Safe and Inclusive with Meeting and Video Conferencing Controls. My name is John Gruszek. I'm a product manager here at Microsoft. I help work on anything security, compliance, and privacy related within Microsoft Teams. Agenda for the day, we're going to go ahead and start out with a quick touch base on Microsoft 365 and why it's important to leverage that integrated security and compliance throughout. And then we'll dive deep into our core content, which is focused on fostering a safe and inclusive workplace. We'll do some live demos on end user meeting conferencing controls and also some data and information protection controls. To get started, again, it's important to understand how Microsoft 365 really sets that foundational strength, intelligence, security layer by integrating security and compliance across all of our services. So the session today is focused on Teams and more specifically Teams meetings, but you'll see here on this slide we have these 6 areas of protection ranging across all of Microsoft 365. So it's areas like conditional access and multi-factor authentication for identity and access management, to data protection and controls with our information protection and governance, ranging all the way down to our more compliance-specific or compliance-focused items like discover and response, and also insider risk management. By having this integrated security and compliance across Microsoft 365, we have these protections across all of our services. And specific to Microsoft Teams, we have 5 areas we like to focus on. The first being Microsoft believes that privacy is a fundamental human right. We back that up by designing safeguarding your privacy into all of our services. Today's session is focused on these meetings and video conferencing controls. Last slide, I touched upon the identity and account protection and also cybersecurity protection that we have integrated across Microsoft 365. And of course, it's always important to touch upon that Microsoft is an industry leader supporting more than 90 regulations and internal compliance. So shifting to those security controls for video conferencing and collaboration. This slide, we're going to touch mostly admin controls, and we'll start with those meeting and live events policies. So the ability to create granular level policies on meetings and live events, and also being able to create those based on departments, business units, or user groups. We know, and we've heard loud and clear that it's not common for organizations to be able to apply a one-size-fits-all security policy, and that's true for meetings and live events as well. And so one of the things we've done with those governance layers is creating department, business unit, or user group specific meeting and live events policies. And I'll give an example that I like to use is our legal team probably doesn't need the same level of organizational standard policies for meetings. And it could be, for example, that our legal team is doing more open collaborative meetings, working with other partner legal teams or other partner legal domains that they federated with. And in that case, we actually want to have a little bit more open collaboration inside those meetings than our general organizational-wide policy. Again, it is our legal team. We trust them to be following our internal regulatory requirements. But a good example to back that up is legal teams oftentimes want to have everything transcribed and recorded. And again, we talk about those federated domains coming in. We can actually give those guest users the ability to present and control out their content, whereas our general organizational-wide policy might be that any non-meeting organizer is unable to share their content unless promoted. Keeping on those governance layers, both from internal and guest access controls, we want to be able to enable that secure outside org collaboration. So with external access, we're talking about domain federation to be able to communicate and chat with those outside domains. And then guest access is actually bringing guests into our organization. So bringing them into our teams and being able to set those security and compliance layers. So an example here I like to use is I like to really empower my guests with full open team collaboration, but I will not allow them to delete messages. And then also I'm going to require their Giphy or media content rating to be strict, whereas my internal employees or internal organization is able to delete messages and has a little bit less strict standards on the media that they're able to use. Moving down to policy packages, this is a great way to easily apply baseline security settings to specific user groups. And we have some great examples across first-line workers, first-line managers, and across the education space. And these policy packages, again, are a great baseline setting. You're able to go into these policies and edit and tinker with them as needed. But they're, again, a great way to be able to apply a great security layer or baseline policy targeted to user groups. And to wrap this up, again, I mentioned that governance with department-specific policies, whether it's departments, business units, sensitive user groups. Don't be afraid to create those kind of granular level policies. If you need to allow more open collaboration, or for example, if you're a research and development department, cannot have any screen sharing, cannot have any recording going on, you can create those more restrictive meeting policies as well based on your organization. Moving along to data and information protection within Microsoft Teams, we'll focus on 3 areas: sensitivity labels, data loss prevention, and communication compliance. A lot of customers out there are already using sensitivity labels, being able to classify documents and have things like custom watermarks on there that say confidential. We're very excited to announce the ability of sensitivity labels to be associated with Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, and groups containers. And so we can actually apply these pre-created sensitivity labels to control access. And another really cool area of using these sensitivity labels within Teams or SharePoint containers is we have the ability to actually block unmanaged devices from being able to access that content as well. Moving on to data loss prevention, it's that integration, again, at that Microsoft 365 layer to be able to prevent employees from either purposely or unintentionally sharing sensitive information in a channel or chat session. And again, it's leveraging that intelligence and strength of Microsoft 365. So if you've already created DLP policies in your organization for something like SharePoint or Exchange, you can easily enable that same DLP policy to work for Teams, channel, and chats. The last area is communication compliance, so being able to intelligently identify any sort of communication violations for a healthy workplace. So this includes not only sensitive data leaks, but also includes things like offensive language, threatening or harassing behavior. We want to be able to identify those violations, raise them up to our IT and security teams so we can address that non-inclusive behavior in the organization. And these I'll do a quick demo on in a bit, but we're going to go ahead and move on here to a general slide of what's new in Microsoft Teams. And I'm not going to drain this slide completely because we want to go into some of the demos, but to start with, it's those meeting and video conferencing controls. And these are focused on not just admins, but also those meeting organizers. And that's what we really want to start to empower our end users to be able to leverage these controls. And so it includes lobby and pre-meeting controls, so being able for both IT and meeting organizers to specify who's able to bypass that lobby, who's able to join our meetings and present and share out their content directly. And then it goes into, once that meeting kicks off, those organizer tools. So the ability of the meeting organizer to do a hard mute, which is across all attendees. And so why that could be extremely beneficial is we think of a one-to-many broadcast like a lecture or just a internal to external sharing. We of course have the ability to mute individual attendees, but in the case that we want to make sure that only the individual speaker is able to be heard, we can do a hard mute on all those other attendees. We also have the ability to end meetings and then also prevent the rejoin. So again, this is important because once a meeting wraps up, we want the ability to actually end that meeting and then prevent any of those end users, whether they're internal or external, from being able to rejoin that meeting, have any sort of additional discussions without the meeting organizer there. We can actually create that enforcement of ending the meeting and blocking it off. And then lastly, as an inclusive behavior, we have the ability to request to speak or raise our hand. And again, with this shift in remote work and not being in person, it's sometimes hard to identify when someone was trying to speak up or trying to get their point in. So again, it's a great feature to be able to raise your hand. It's very visible for everyone in the meeting that a hand was raised, and we can allow that person to come in and talk. As far as information protection, we touched upon these 3 areas. And again, we're very excited to have these integrations in Microsoft Teams. We're going to jump down to these additional compliance features that we have now integrated in Microsoft Teams. The first being native integration with insider risk management. Anytime an insider risk management case is created, we have the ability to create a Microsoft private team and then also include all those relevant stakeholders to be able to securely coordinate and collaborate on that case. Advanced e-discovery now supports live documents and links shared within Microsoft Teams. So these live docs can be shared out from OneDrive or SharePoint, and we have the ability for advanced e-discovery to collect and analyze. Another really exciting announcement that we made at Microsoft Ignite is the support for retention policies for Microsoft Teams meeting recordings. And a really cool ability of this is also leveraging that Microsoft 365 security and knowing that these retention policies will go with wherever those Microsoft Teams meetings are stored at. So again, we made this announcement that you can expect retention policies around the October timeframe. And last, but of course, but not least, we have the general availability of Compliance Manager, and we're really excited to announce that we have team-specific actions now integrated within Compliance Manager to help make sure that across your organization that you are geared up to be supporting your internal regulatory and compliance requirements. Now that we've wrapped up what's new, I want to go ahead and dive into some demos. We're going to be talking about some meeting and video conferencing controls, those organizer controls, and then we'll also get into the end user view of how we protect against data loss prevention and communication compliance. As we hop into the demo, the first place that we're going to start is in the Teams Admin Center with some meeting policies and controls. Early on, I mentioned the ability to create those governance layers, since a one-size-fits-all approach often doesn't work. And so in this case, you can see here that I have my organizational-wide meeting policy that is fairly restrictive to make sure we're keeping those meetings secure and compliant. But what I've done here is actually create two department-level policies that help either be more or less restrictive. And so in this example, I'm going to keep using my legal team here, and I'm going to say actually that they have more open and collaborative meetings because it's a very controlled group of people. And so, for instance, I'm actually going to allow the transcription to occur because they need to document everything that's said. I'm going to allow a participant to give a request control. And then also we're going to automatically admit not only everyone in my organization, but also those federated organizations that they're often working with. So again, the ability to create those more open collaboration settings and apply it to my legal team and everyone within that, whereas my general Contoso-wide policy is going to be a little bit more restrictive of that. So great governance ability. And now we'll switch over to the Compliance Center here, and we're going to start with data loss prevention. And really, we're just going to highlight the integration of Microsoft 365 and into the services. And so I've already had this medical prevention policy created, but we've recently rolled out Teams. And it is this easy to now enable it for chat and channel messages. We go back, we edit the policy, and we simply just switch this on, and we're now supporting the policy throughout Teams chat and channel messages, which will show off at the end to do an actual end user demo view of this. But again, great that you don't have to go through and create brand new policies just to support Microsoft Teams. You're able to leverage what you've already built out through Microsoft 365. Same thing is going to hold into effect for communication compliance. So you'll see that I've created 3 policies here. The Mark 9 is focused on sensitive information. Contoso HR focuses on threatening, offensive, or harassing behavior. And then lastly, the Contoso HR custom dictionary policy has a list of words that Contoso has deemed not suitable to use in the organization. And I can click to edit any one of these. And we can easily see on the location screen that we are supporting not just Exchange, Yammer, but also Microsoft Teams as well. And so now we are going to pivot from the admin side over to the end user view. So the first thing we'll do is, before we can even get into a meeting, is we actually have the ability for meeting organizers to have some of those lobby controls. So I'm in a pre-existing meeting that I've actually has already passed, but I've went and edited that meeting. And you can see that I can change a handful of different meeting options. So I can decide who's able to bypass the lobby, who's able to present, whether I want attendees to be able to unmute themselves when joining. And this is a good example of an extremely locked down meeting. So I have only me that can bypass the lobby. I have only me that can present. And I'm actually going to say that attendees are not able to unmute unless I go ahead and do so. Again, not only is IT able to set some top level restrictive controls here if needed, we also empower our meeting organizers to control these as well. And so now we'll go from the meeting options or the lobby options into the meeting itself. So I'm going to hop into a Meet Now that I joined from my Microsoft Teams. And one of the first things that we want to talk about is that ability to have that mute all for attendees. We have that right here over here in our participants pane. So it's in the past, it was common if an attendee came off mute and they were being a bit disruptive, you'd have to go and click on the individual user. We'd go ahead and selectively mute them. But in large one-to-many audiences, it's very difficult to keep them all on mute. We know accidents happen. And we think of things like lectures or one-to-many presentations. It's really only one person that should be speaking. So we have that ability to go up here and actually do not allow attendees to unmute. So again, we can set that in the meeting options. So when everyone joins, that's already set. Or if we decide that, hey, it wasn't going as well, we need to just mute everyone, we have that ability to create that custom control here. As far as inclusivity, I mentioned earlier the ability to raise your hand to request to speak. So I'm going to select that in my upper ribbon up here. I can actually select raise my hand. You'll see there it will pop up a notification that someone in the participant pane has done an action, and it even shows a nice little hand wave next to my name in the participant pane. So again, with remote meetings, we know it can be tough making sure everyone gets heard, folks talking over each other on the microphone. This is a great inclusive behavior to make sure we're looking out for people that may want to have their voice heard, get their opinion or information into the meeting. So it's easy enough. You can raise your hand. People will also see it on your image in the tile. So that they can clearly see that you're trying to get into the meeting. And then the last thing I wanted to show is that ability to actually have a hard end to a meeting. And so we have that ability when we're going to close out a meeting to either click leave, or we actually will have a drop down that once selected, you have the ability to actually select end meeting. And what that end meeting will do is once you select it, it will close out the meeting. So no one is actually able to rejoin that meeting and continue on. You as the meeting organizer will actually close it off. So again, another great example, if we need to make sure a meeting is locked down, there's only limited presenters, not only just limited presenters, but we want to have full control over recording or anything like that, we do have the ability to lock that down, and then we can make sure that once that meeting ends, no one else is able to rejoin. And now the last thing that we'll go ahead and highlight is I'll switch over to Megan Bowen's Teams client here. And we can see that she was chatting with Alex Wilbur, and she said, hey, that's great, let's grab some lunch. And she went to attempt to share her credit card. And you can see that our DLP policy actually blocked this message from going through. And so it's credit card. This credit card is sensitive information. We absolutely do not want it to get shared. So again, we block that. And then we give this nice little link for the end user to click on. And it will pull open a little blurb to let them know that the organization blocked it, and more specifically why it was blocked. And this is based on the idea that we want to make sure that we're educating end users on why these items were blocked, so that they don't continue that behavior, whether it's a communication compliance that's targeted towards offensive language, or it's something simple like this that is a personal identification number, passport, credit card. Accidental sharing mistakes do happen, but whether they're accidental or intentional, we want to make sure that we're able to capture those through DLP, through communication compliance, and report those up. And the last thing to mention is if there was a mistake that the employee believes, hey, this wasn't actually a credit card number. In this case, I was just trying to type out a long number. They do have the ability to report it up to the administrator, but just do note that it doesn't actually still send the message. It just sends a report up to IT. So again, we went from governance policies up in the admin center of Teams and compliance, looked at some of those pre-meeting options, and then in the meeting, we have that ability to hard mute, inclusive feature with raising your hand, requesting to speak, ability to end our meeting and prevent attendees from rejoining. Extremely helpful, all of those in one-to-many audiences. And again, we took a look at some of the information protection to really support that safe, inclusive workplace. So now we're going to hop back into the slides. So now we got to see some of those meetings and information protection controls in action. To close out the session, I really want to leave you with 4 points to help foster and drive a safe, inclusive, and healthy workplace. First is create those governance layers on meeting and live events policies. Again, it's not common that a one-size-fits-all approach is best. In some cases, you will have departments, business units, or user groups that need to have a little bit more open collaboration in their meetings, and vice versa. You will also have groups that may need to have a little bit more restriction placed on their meetings. Creating those governance layers and multiple meeting policies helps enable you to fit that organizational requirement or goal. Moving along to data loss and information protection. Again, implement those data loss prevention and communication compliance controls to help foster that safe, inclusive workplace. Also help make sure that sensitive data is remaining within the organization. And then again, you're fostering that inclusive workplace through communication compliance, being able to identify any sort of offensive or threatening behavior. And this leads into the third point of being able to educate our end users on our meetings, controls, and also those information protection and communication compliance controls. So in the demo, we showed how important it is to have that learn more tip about when your message may have been flagged for data loss prevention or communication compliance. We really want to not just block an end user. We want to be able to inform them, hey, this is why a violation occurred, so we can help prevent that user from committing a violation in the future. And as far as meeting conferencing controls go, IT can't be in every meeting, so it's important to educate and empower our end users to use these controls in the meeting so they're able to appropriately control who is able to come into the meeting before it actually kicks off. And then again, empowered to be able to do something like end the meeting and prevent a rejoin from anything like anonymous attendees. And then last, but of course not least, I'll leave you with my number one tip. Always leverage the strength and intelligence of Microsoft 365. Leverage that integrated security and compliance that flows throughout the services. So wherever you are joining us from, whether it's day or night, I just want to say thank you again for tuning into the session. And of course, check out the Microsoft Tech community, and we'll be speaking with you soon. Thanks again.